Gundam Build Fighters was a series that, as a huge fan of Gundam, Gunpla and sports series in general, basically ticked every box for me. So when the day came for another season to air, I obviously couldn't be happier, but with how good the first series was, would they be able to continue that quality the second time around? That is a question I shall be answering in this video, but if you've yet to watch my review of the first season, I highly advise you do so to get my full thoughts, and there are things that apply to both seasons mentioned in that review I won't be repeating. But do not fear if you've yet to see the first season, as I won't be spoiling anything from either. So hello, welcome back, I am BakaShift, and today I present to you a review of Gundam Build Fighters Try. It is a 25 episode shonen action sports series that aired in the full season of 2014, was produced by the studio Sunrise, written by Yusuke Kuroda and directed by Shinya Watada. There were numerous things I wanted from this sequel, with many of them pertaining to the unanswered questions I had regarding certain things about the world of the first season. But it was made evident very quickly that this one was going to be enjoyable for entirely different reasons. 7 years have passed since the 7th Gunpla Battle Championship World Tournament that took place at the end of the first season. Our story takes place in the very same Seiho Academy that Sayori attended back then, but its Gunpla Battle Club unfortunately only has one remaining member. Fumina Hoshino is in dire need of gaining teammates to fight in the upcoming All Japan Gunpla Battle Championship, for one of the new rules of the tournament is that battles must be fought in teams of 3. Things look bleak until a young martial arts obsessed transfer student by the name of Sekai Kameki shows up and learns the joys of Gunpla battle. They, along with Fumina's childhood friend and talented Gunpla builder Yuma Kosaka, soon form Team Try Fighters to take on the competition in the upcoming tournament. There are a lot of things about Try that are completely different to the original, which in many ways make this series feel like something completely new by comparison. For whilst it is a follow-up, it's not a direct sequel and can in many ways be viewed as a standalone piece with its own story that simply abides to the rules laid out in Season 1. Try is a lot simpler, it takes away many of the wider ongoing plot lines and is in many ways far less eventful from a narrative perspective, so I'd say there's no guarantee that all fans of the first season will enjoy this one. It also adopts a semi-episodic fight of the week-like approach to its storytelling, with a majority of its emphasis falling on the battles themselves. There's a good amount of training, gunpla building and foreshadowing developing important rivals mixed in too, but this time there's next to no actual villainy going on in the background, so all that's on the line is, well, winning. But don't get me wrong, it may sound like I'm being negative, but I do absolutely adore this thing and genuinely believe it knew exactly what it wanted to do and achieved it with flying colours. And what it wanted to do was get people like me uncontrollably hype through being a super robot battle shonen with perhaps more in common with something like G Gundam than the first season. So the action in this thing was absolutely immense, with hype levels completely off the charts. Like, I really can't describe just how hype numerous parts of this thing made me when I was watching it. Getting hype is the main reason why I enjoy this type of show. It's the biggest draw to sports anime and shonen action series as a whole for me, and this thing is certainly a contender for the show that made me the most hype ever. There you go, there's a video I should make one day. Top 10 shows that made me really hype. But this begs a couple of questions. What was it that made this show so hype, and was that the only thing that made the Gunpla battles enjoyable? To the latter, I'd say absolutely not. The 3-on-3 dynamic often made for some really compelling tactical exchanges through interesting methods, even if they also made questionable decisions sometimes. Though I always wondered why there was such an emphasis on 3s in this show. I mean, it's the second season, but it's called Try? Like, there's 3 main characters, 3 different gunpla for each of them, 3 different episodes containing the digit 3, Try on 3? It's like there's a reason behind all of this. Wait a minute. But anyway, onto my other question, what was it that made this show as hype as it was? There was a lot of ridiculous stuff going on, but I'd say the key reason can be attributed to the protagonist Sekai being a martial arts nutter and student of the Jigen Hao School of Kempo, which basically meant that instead of using guns and beam sabers to defeat his opponents, he shouted really loud and punched and kicked things until they exploded. So when you hear that water drop, you know it's time to go crazy. And it made me lose my shit every single time it happened, and it kept getting more and more intense as the series went on. It damn near changed my life. But that's not the only thing that made this show enjoyable. The comedy was just as good as it was in season 1, and there were still some passing elements of romance. Then of course it was still full to the brim with direct references to other Gundam shows, and even one incredible nod to a different shonen sports series, but because the show is so focused on G Gundam specifically, there are a lot more references to that than anything else this time around. Now as for how things conclude in this series, the final battle was absolutely the best one for me. I could go off on another hype train about how good that fight was, but I've calmed down a bit now, so I'll leave it at that. It was hype, alright? Then the last episode, aside from feeling like it would have been better off as a side story OVA, was still brilliant and I can't really complain about it. But then there's the very important ongoing unanswered plot point around Reiji's origins from season 1, which didn't even get a passing mention in this series. This is a small issue I had with the first, but it's not something that bothers me too much in this one, because all plot points brought up in this series specifically are dealt with by the end. Also, in my fanboyish bias towards Build Fighters, I actually like that it wasn't brought up, because that, along with some hints that were dropped at the end, basically confirm that we'll be getting a third season one day. A third season in which I can only hope and assume all the great characters from the other two will lock horns in another world tournament. And when I say great characters from both seasons, unfortunately there are many in Try that I'm not all that keen on, but the main trio definitely delivered and the show handles the transition between casts very well. So starting with the protagonist, Sekai Kamiki was a damn convincing and entertaining lead to the story, and as I mentioned earlier was responsible for most of this thing's best moments. He's an incredibly passionate and straightforward kid whose origins and reasons for looking exactly like Reiji remain mysterious, but he wears his ideals and motivations on his sleeve in a very entertaining manner. Everything about him revolves around his love for martial arts, and his dedication in that field and love for competition and challenge are what allow him to apply every fibre of his being to success in Gunpla battle. He's very dense about many things because of this one-track mind of his, so his honourable nature and lust for victory leave him completely clueless when numerous girls start showing affection towards him. This made for great comedy, and whilst he's absolutely not as compelling as the two main characters in the first season, he's still made for a damn good lead. More importantly, it's that he's the most fitting lead to this series, with its focus on action and battle shrewdly mirroring Sekai's way of life. Then we move on to Yuma Korsaka, who is China from the first season's little brother and someone with far more of a developed and clear history than Sekai. He's a very calm and serious individual throughout the series, and also very cautious in his methods, which is why he's primarily a sniper on the Try Fighters team. He's a character who has to undergo a lot more change in development than the other two in order to reach his full potential in the series, and the journey he takes to deal with his past was certainly a compelling part of the story. I must say he is easily my least favourite of the three main characters though, as whilst his position in the story is very important, I did find his actions and abilities far less interesting by comparison. But without him, the Try Fighters could never have become what they are, as he and our final main character Fumina Hoshino shared a promise from a very young age to enter the world tournament together. And as for Fumina herself, well, I think a lot of you may already be familiar with what I happen to think about this particular individual. I made a big point of mentioning how great I felt the female characters were in the original series, and the same is true here. There are 4 new noteworthy female characters in Try, and they are all absolutely wonderful. But of all the girls in both seasons, Fumina is most certainly my favourite, and I think the best way for me to describe her is that she is actually perfect. I was sold on her from the very first line of dialogue in the very first episode, in which she says, "I love Gunpla," and proceeds to become best girl. Fumina is an incredibly passionate, caring and enthusiastic individual who always prioritises her teammates over herself, even to the point of dulling her own individual abilities. And I could go on for days about why Fumina is best waifu, but I'll force a full stop on my gushing and simply once again state that she is absolute perfection. Now to follow on from what I alluded to before, in that a lot of the other characters in Try didn't really do it for me. This isn't to say that they were bad characters by any means, it's just that the 3-on-3 dynamic of the show essentially meant that there were 3 times as many characters to fit into the same number of episodes. This meant that there was nowhere near enough time to fully develop each rival, and made a lot of them feel very disposable, and most of the teams felt as though they were comprised of 1 important character sporting 2 nameless accessories. This apparent flaw in the team-based scenario was made all the more evident when I think about the few returning characters from the first season, and even though they don't get that much screen time, they were all absolutely fantastic. Meijin Kawaguchi in particular was one of the biggest reasons I love Try so much, for his role in this season built upon and enhanced the greatness he displayed in the first. He became an inspirational and incredible figure, and I was hanging on his every word. Which means that if and when season 3 does roll around, the great rival characters introduced in Try who lack development probably aren't going to be anywhere near as interesting interesting as those returning from the first season. But even though this is the case, I absolutely can't fault any of their designs and have absolutely no complaints to make on this front. There were very few character designs in Try that I disliked, as with the school-based setup we got a nice array of matching uniforms with eye-catching nuances to tie each team together. If anything, these designs are what made many of the characters memorable, making up for their other shortcomings in spades. Then there are some little things like how Yuma's glasses are in the shape of Gundam eyes that added a nice quirk to an otherwise simple appearance. Then of course the thing that I most enjoyed talking about and something that Try managed to completely excel at was its mechanical designs. Now instead of exclusively using custom variants of existing mobile suit designs as with the first season, Try takes things a few steps further and adds its own completely original designs which are simply based on or inspired by other mobile suits instead. This makes a lot of sense in the lore of Build Fighters itself, as it's set 7 years on and the lengths people will have gone to create their own unique gunpla would be far more extensive at this point. And many of these new designs are absolutely fantastic, and I'm eagerly awaiting news of future master grades to throw my money at. There was however one design in particular I wasn't all that fond of, and it was made far worse by the fact that for the first time in both seasons we've seen something animated purely in CGI. And not only is it animated in CGI, but it's also a dragon. A CGI dragon, if you will.
CGI dragon sex metaphor!
Luckily this was only used once and all other animation was just as crisp and clean as in the first season, perhaps even better at times, with numerous incredibly striking sequences of exaggerated motion giving certain moments more visual impact. This same level of quality also continued into the soundtrack, which was just as good as the first season for pretty much all of the same reasons I discussed in the last review. What I do want to bring up though are the openings and endings, all of which were fantastic for me, but the first opening of Try is actually my current favourite opening of all time. It's incredibly uplifting and always got me pumped and ready for what was to come each episode, with lyrics that fit this thing's tone and themes of teamwork flawlessly. Back on. Man, they're so good. The final thing I wish to briefly mention is the voice acting, which is again fantastic as with season 1, but this time due to the intensity of characters like Sekai screaming their attack names, I really need to give credit where it's due. If not for that additional level of brilliance in the voice acting, I can't say for sure the battles would have been quite as hype as I've been describing them. And there you have it, I have rambled on for long enough, so the question left to answer is of course, was it as good as the first season? And as much as I loved it, and as much as I adored the new things Try brought to the table, I think I've made it clear in this review why I have to answer no. The first season just has so much more going for it than this one, but I still wasn't disappointed by Try in the slightest, and urge you all to watch both seasons if you're a fan of its genres. Much like season 1, this thing can be streamed in its entirety in most countries over on the Gundam Info YouTube channel, so head on to the link in the description and check it out if you're interested. Another link you'll find in the description that you should be sure to check out leads to the episode of Anime Club we did on this series if you want to hear my full unabridged spoilerful thoughts. So, have you seen this show? If so, what did you think of it? And as always, feel free to drop me a recommendation of what you want me to review next. Now remember, gunpla is freedom, and I may or may not see you next week.